Hello and welcome to this lecture. And in this lecture, we will go ahead and learn how to add a form which allows users to add food items to our website. So I hope you guys already know what a form actually is. It's nothing but it's actually a page which has a bunch of input elements and a button, so that whenever you go ahead and type some things into the input field and hit the button, that data is going to be submitted to the database. So if you don't already have an idea of what a form is, you can simply go ahead and have a look over here. So this thing right over here is nothing but a form which allows us to edit this particular item over here. So we are going to have something similar over here on our website. So instead of having to enter data from the admin panel, the users can actually go ahead and enter data directly over here. So let's go ahead and learn how to do that. So let's go ahead, go to the code editor, and first of all you need to go ahead and understand that in order to create a form, you'll actually need to go ahead, set up the URL patterns, create a view, create a template, and everything like that. So just as we have followed the steps for creating a particular view, so for creating a particular view, you first go ahead, go into the views.py file, which is this file right here. You write a view, then you pass in a template, then you go ahead, create a template, then you go ahead and set up the URL pattern for that particular view in the urls.py file. So this is a set procedure we all know for creating a view, and we are going to follow the same procedure to add a form as well. So the very first thing which we do here is that we set up a path for the form. So let's go ahead and set up the path for a form which allows us to add items. So I'll go ahead and have a comment here, and I'll say something like add items, so that we understand that this particular path is for adding items. So I'll type in path over here, and let's say the name of this thing is going to be add. So whenever you type in /food/add, we are actually going to be presented with a form to add the items. So let's go ahead and also assign a view to this. So I'll type in view dot, let's say the name of that view is going to be create item. Now remember that we have not yet created this view as of now, but we are going to create that very soon. And also I'll just go ahead and assign a name to this URL as well. So let's say the name which I assign over here is going to be create item as well. Go ahead, give a comma, and you have successfully set up the path over here. Now this thing is going to show you an error because we have not created the view. Okay, so now once this thing is created, for having a form, you actually need to do one extra thing. And that extra thing is that you need to go ahead and go into your food app, which is this app right here, and you need to create a new file which is called as forms.py file. So let's go ahead and create that file up. So I'll just go ahead, click on new file, and I'll type in as forms.py. So now this forms.py is actually going to have a class for each form which we are creating. So in here, the first thing which we do is that we go ahead and import forms. So in the forms.py file, I'll just go ahead and type in from Django import forms. And once I have imported forms, I'll also need to go ahead and import the model, which is item, because this form is going to be for the item table. So I'll type in from dot models import item. And now once we go ahead and do that, we'll create a class for this particular form. So I'll type in class, and let's name this form as item form. So item form over here, because this is a form to add items, and in here it actually needs to inherit from the model form. So I can type in forms dot model form over here. Now in here we actually need to create a meta class which is going to hold the information about what fields should be present in that particular form. So I'll type in class meta, and here we need to specify the model which we are using. So the model which we want to use is the item model, because this is a form related to item. And we also need to specify fields here, which means that which specific fields do we want on that particular form. So in our case, the fields are nothing but these fields right here, which is nothing but the item name, description, price, and image. So I can simply go ahead and add those fields over here. So I can type in item underscore name item underscore description, item underscore price, and the final one is item underscore image. So once I go ahead and do that, this class is pretty much ready. So the main purpose of this class is to tell Django that you want to use the model which is item for this particular form, and these are the fields which we want to use, or we want to accept the data from user in that particular form. Okay, so now we have completed two steps. First step is we have actually set up the URL, then we have created this forms.py file, and we have set up the item form right here. Now we need to create the actual template for the form. So again, in order to create a template, we already know that all of our site templates are actually present over here. So let's go ahead and create a new file, and let's name this template as, let's say, item-form.html. Now once you go ahead and do that, now you can go ahead and start designing the form here. So now, in order to create a form, we simply use the form tag, and the method for this is going to be the post method. And now, even before you start creating a form, you actually need to use a tag which is called as the CSRF token tag. So this tag is used for security, and I'm not going to go into much detail of this particular tag, but just for the sake of understanding, this particular tag which we'll be using here is going to actually prevent cross-site scripting while using forms. So simply type in CSRF underscore token, and now what you have to do is that you simply have to go ahead and use the form here. So you can simply type in form here and simply have a button at the end. So you can type in button type equals submit, and let's say this thing says something like save. Okay, so now let's understand the code. So this thing right here is nothing but the form tag, and as we actually want to post the data to the database, we are using the post method right over here. This is a token which you actually need to include for security reasons. This is simply a button over here, which is the submit button which you have in the form, and this form is actually nothing but it's actually a context which we will pass from a view which we have not created. So now let's go ahead and create a view to pass this form context. So now let's go to the views.py file, and in here we need to create a new view for the form. So I'll go ahead and type in def, and the name of this view is nothing but, we have actually mentioned that name over here, which is called as create item. So you need to use the same name over there. So let's go to the views.py file and type in create underscore item, and this is going to have a request. And now what we do here is that first of all, we actually get the form which we are using. So we have already created a form here. So if you go to the forms.py file over here, as you can see, we have created the item form here. So this item form is actually a class, and we are actually going to go ahead and create an object out of that class. So we'll type in form equals item form, and then we actually need to pass in a request. So we type in request.post, meaning that we are either using the post request or we are using none. So now once we have this form object, the next thing which we do is that we actually need to go ahead and submit the form data or save the form data. Now even before saving the form data, we need to figure out if the data of this form is valid. So in order to check that, I type in if form.isValid. So this isValid is actually a function or a method which makes sure that the data which is entered into the form is valid. And now once we are sure that the data is valid, we can now go ahead and save the form. So I can type in form.save over here. So the save method is actually going to help us to save the form. And now once the form data is saved, and once the user has actually entered the form data, we then want to redirect the user to some sort of a new page. So let's say, for example, if the user enters all the details inside the form, we want to redirect him to the index page. So I'll type in return redirect. So this redirect method actually redirects users to a specific page. So we want to redirect them to the index page. So I'll type in food:index. And remember why we have typed in food over here, because we have used namespacing for apps. And now once we have that, the final thing which we need to do now is that we need to go ahead and return from the main view right over here. So I'll type in return render, and here we actually want to render the template, which is nothing but the template which we have just created, which is item-form. So first of all, I'll pass in request. So this is the same usual thing which we do when we return a template or render a template. That is, you pass in the request, you pass in the template name, and then you pass in the context. So here's the request. Now let's go ahead and add in the template. So the template is food/item-form. And now for the context, as I earlier mentioned, we actually want to pass this form right here. So I can simply go ahead and type in form and type in form over here. So now, as I earlier mentioned, if you go to the itemform.html, here is the context which I'm talking about. So now let's understand the flow of how exactly this form will work. So first of all, let's go to the urls.py file, which is this file right here. Okay, so this should actually be views, not view. So after fixing that, let's go to the flow. So whenever you go to the path, which is food/add, it's actually going to look for the view which is called as create item. So now let's go to the views.py, and this is the create item view right here. So now it's actually going to create an object out of the item form class. Now where exactly is this item form class present? This class is actually present in the file which is forms.py. So it's actually going to look at this particular class. It's actually going to look at the model which this class is using and the fields over here. So from that, it will create a new form with these fields for this particular model. So now let's go back from where we came. So let's go back over here. Now once it has a form, it's going to create the object from that. And now once we have the object, it's actually going to render a template which is item-form. So the item-form template is nothing but the template, which is this template right here. And this is actually going to go ahead and use the context as form. That means it is going to have all those fields over here for the item, and then it's going to have a submit button. Now when we go ahead and submit this form, what this will do is that it will check if the form item is valid. Then on clicking the submit button, it's going to submit the form, and then we will be finally redirected to the index page, which is this page right here. Now as you can see, we are getting errors over here. That is because we have not yet imported item form and redirect. So let's go ahead and do that. So we are actually going to import redirect from the Django.shortcuts. So let's type in redirect over here. And for the item form, we want to import that from forms. So from dot forms, which is nothing but the forms.py file, we'll type in import item form. So once we have added these imports over here, we can now go ahead and run and test our form. So we'll go ahead and test this form in the upcoming lecture and see if this thing works fine. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Thank you.